Ooh, get that closed. Oh. Whoa, get that one closed. Hey, how are you? It's Friday afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. It's History Chap Live. Looking at some of the events that happened in British history this week. A real sort of snapshot. So those of you who've never been on one of these shows before, no pictures, no maps. It's me talking, okay, and talking, effectively off the top of my head about some of the events in British history. So not perfectly scripted. So very different to the normal videos you see that I upload every week, okay, including, of course, last night, the story of HMS Petrel and the famous last stand in Shanghai in December 1941, where brilliantly the captain of the ship, when he's asked to surrender by the Japanese, massive cruiser next to it, basically the Japanese officer comes on board, asks him to surrender, and the British naval captain turns around and says, "Get off my bloody ship," which is just one of those classic bloody-minded British responses when you've got a cruiser looking at your little gunboat down on the river in Shanghai. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't, of course, look it up after this show. So welcome, and people are already in the comments. By the way, put your name in, say hello in the chat, where you're from. Always nice, because I'm just nosy, and equally, join in the banter and join in the questions. And I'll say now that you might put questions in there, which if you see a question someone else has put in there and you know the answer, then put their answer in. Okay, don't wait for me. I have to say this: the chat gets a bit mad, and I don't see everybody's comment. But by all means, join in. So welcoming from the very top here, we've got Chris Rams. Welcome to Hearts of Oak. Welcome to my membership channel as well. Thank you very much for signing up. Very grateful for that. John Sadler is like, watch with mother. Is it? Oh my God. Well, hopefully I'm not mother. Sarah Jane, nice to see you. Cara the Tolkien nerd. Is that a different Cara to Cara Hughes? I don't know. Vince. I hope, Vince, you were mentioned in dispatches, as it were, in that video that I put out yesterday about the British ship fighting the Japanese in Shanghai. You're the Vince that I was referring to. So thank you very much for your support, mate. Lionheart, good to see. Yeah, you've just said a while since you managed the live show. I was going to say, I haven't seen you around, but nice you've joined us today. Thank you very much. Neil Morrison up in Scotland, lovely to see you as well. Thank you very much, Sarah Jane, about that video. Thank you very much. Duncan Kilburn, nice to see you as well. James Beeching down in a very moist Taunton. Oh, very nice. Thank you very much. Moving on swiftly. Roy Cousins, London. Nice to see you, Roy. Timothy Hopper. Hey, Australia. Nice to see you as well, Timothy. I haven't seen you for a while, a bit like Lionheart. So great that you're with us. Thank you very much. And slightly belated this week, but a happy Australia Day to you down there as well. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I was just about to read your comment again, Timothy. Sorry. Bottom man from Bayern in Germany. Thank you very much. Bayern. Robert Hutchins, New England. Hey, the first of the North American Brigade to be signing in today. Vince, you love the petrol video. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great story, wasn't it? And there's so many, the international settlement in Shanghai just has some really, interesting stories around it, which I will come to. But several of you in the comments to the video said how much you enjoyed it and how you'd love to see some of those other stories. So I'll be telling you those coming up. Chris Bell, Iowa, early morning there. I bet it is, mate, in the Midwest. And lovely. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't know what the weather's like in Iowa. I can imagine it's colder than it is here, but I stand to be corrected. Jen Ingle, Cumbria, where there's only one weather in Cumbria, isn't there, Jen? Raining. Cara the Tolkien nerd says, no, it's a different Cara. Thank you. And you're slightly mad. Well, that's okay. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Smith, any more about the first Afghan war? Okay, sorry, I'll read your question, Neil, because it's a good question. It could open a debate here as well. Okay, any chance of more videos about the first Afghan war? This is the first British Afghan war, Anglo-Afghan war, in the 1840s. As some historians have said, that the loss of prestige contributed to the Indian Mutiny. This, of course, the first Anglo-Afghan war, as well Neil, was the moment where the British had gone into Afghanistan. Yes, we have been there once or twice before. This was the first time in the 1840s, right at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign. Went all well, captured Kabul, had a regime change. Ring any bells? And then it all sort of, went to hell. Went to hell in a handcart, and the British withdrew from Kabul, went back towards British India, modern day Pakistan, and heading towards the Khyber Pass, and basically they were annihilated. The retreating column was annihilated. Famously, the last stand by the 44th Regiment at Gandamag. And of course, those of you who are Flashman fans, Flashman was heavily involved in this story. So, and Neil, you said, did it dent British prestige in India? Yeah, I think it did. It certainly had an impact. And so, yes, I will come to that one, because there's some interesting stories. I've only ever done Gandamag as a video from the first Anglo-Afghan War, and likewise from the second Anglo-Afghan War, I did the Battle of Maiwand. But Lord Roberts' epic march through Afghanistan from Kabul to relieve Kandahar in that second Afghan war in the beginning of the 1880s is a major military feat in its own right, and raised Roberts' prestige to the extent that he becomes Commander-in-Chief ultimately of the British Army, right at the very tail end of Queen Victoria's reign. So yeah, I will. It's on my list. In fact, I've got some 19th century stuff I want to cover. We're not going to stay with the Duke of Marlborough forever, Where are we at? So, thank you very much for that one, Neil. Mark Porter, Sydney, Australia. Nice to see you as well. Yeah, we've got US has a lot of snow. Hey, out bush again for another one from Australia. Holy cow! Haven't you guys got a Friday night to be enjoying over there? Oh, James Beeching, you're currently reading William Dalrymple's The Last Mogul, 1857, and all of that. Yeah, great series of books, actually, William Dalrymple. And actually, I think he's quite a fair historian. He's actually very pro-Indian, but, some Indians think he isn't. And there are probably some Brits who think he's a bit too pro-Indian, but he lives out in India, or a lot of the time in India. And from what I recall, he's married to an Indian wife as well. Joe Noon, lovely to see you. Going to listen while you drive to work. Nice one, Joe. Don't know where you're off to work, but yeah, stay with us. We'll talk a little bit more about British history this week. I do enjoy chatting to you all in the chat as well, because this is my moment. One of the great things about being a YouTuber and being a historian, of course, you're self-employed. I can do whatever I like, whenever I like, which is cool. It's also very lonely. And I don't want you all shedding a tear, but this is really good. I've always said to you, if we could all meet in a pub or something, I'd absolutely love that. Maybe we will at some stage. Maybe we will. The History Chap will go on tour around the UK and meet some of you in pubs and things. But this is better than that. Or this is as good as I get for the time being. Leslie Devo, lovely to see you as well. One of my great supporters there from South Carolina in the USA. Philport Way, hello from Wales. Nice to have you here as well. Hey, next week I'm off to Twickenham to see England-Wales in the rugby. That was a Christmas present. Not bad. A bit better than seeing Worcester Warriors, especially after their performance last Saturday at home. Beaten at home last week. Can you believe it? By Hartbury, our local rivals. Good God. Neil Smith, can anyone explain how the Elephant and Castle in London got its name? I've got a bit in the back of my head, but I'll see if anyone else can help you first, Neil. Okay, I'll make a quick note just in case we never get back to it. But if any of you have the background information on London history, stick it in there. As I say, despite being a historian and being a YouTube presenter and podcast presenter and going out speaking as well, I don't have every blinking answer about history. I'm honest enough about that. And a lot of the stories I tell you, that aren't off the top of my head, I've had to research them as well. Strange enough, I was aware of HMS Petrel, and that's about it. So that whole video I did last night, that was on significant amount of research, just to prove to you that I don't just get it off Wikipedia. Although, I don't know about you guys, but there are some YouTube history channels out there that you feel like it is almost word for word Wikipedia, especially some of the AI influenced channels, or indeed AI channels, full stop. Philport Way, come on England, thank you very much indeed. Oh, Lionheart, that's very kind of you. Vince, Vince has slept in there for your thing, the Elephant and Castle in London. But it's a sort of a slang or a deviation on the Infanta of Castile. The Infanta was the Princess of Castile, which Castile was part of Spain, one of the original parts of Spain, married into the English royal family. And yeah, and that's how it got its name. Supposedly, I think she had a palace down there or something, and so it sort of went from the Infanta de Castile to the Elephant and Castle. That's the story I'd heard as well, actually, Vince. So, but there could be many others. The two YouTube channels that come to mind, one is Jules Guides, says QA Library. Are you talking about AI influenced channels, or have I missed another conversation going on here? Yep, Leslie. Yep, you're in there. Yeah, that's the modern image of the Elephant and Castle. The elephant with a castle on its back down in London. But I think Vince is right. It has some sort of tie back to the Infanta, princess from Spain, Middle Ages. So pre Tudors. I think around maybe Edward the Third's time. But again, I stand to be corrected on that. Okay. Sorry, QA Library. You were talking about the London question, about the Elephant and Castle, and you're saying that, if I race back up there, Jules Guides, JOOLZ, and then Guides, on YouTube, it will tell you the answer, or possibly tell you the answer. Thank you very much indeed, Cara. Right, okay, so let's kick off then with some British history for this week. 25th of January, 1533, Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn, the Tudors. They had to be in there somewhere. I mean, basically, let's be honest, British history, English history in particular, Tudors and Winston Churchill, always in there, aren't they, somewhere? Anyway, so we have Henry VIII marrying wife number 2, Anne Boleyn, who would be the mother of Queen Elizabeth I, of course. Same date, but same day, but different year. 25th of January, 1644, the Battle of Nantwich during the English Civil War. Yeah, another period, by the way, that I will, somewhere on the line, I'd love to do some stuff about the English Civil War. And indeed the Wars of the Roses. I'm doing a private lecture series about the Wars of the Roses at the minute. And, just the skullduggery and the twisting and turning of not just inside the royal family, but of the major power families in England at the time were incredible. But anyway, English Civil War, we're a couple of years into the English Civil War at this stage. Nantwich in Cheshire is the lone parliamentarian outpost in a county that was fundamentally a royalist supporting county. Bit of thorn in the side. The royalists were besieging Nantwich. They really wanted to take it to consolidate the northwest of England. And you've got to remember that at this time, the nearby town or city of Chester on the River Dee was the main port in the northwest of England, connecting England to Ireland. So control of Cheshire had the opportunity for Charles I to bring more supporters over from Ireland to join the civil war in England on his side, obviously. A parliamentary force was marching from Manchester towards rubbish weather, by the way, in January 1644. A parliamentary relief force under Sir Thomas Fairfax was marching from Manchester to relieve the town of Nantwich. Fairfax had about 5,000 men with him. The royalists besieging Nantwich had about 3,500. They were commanded by Lord John Byron. And you're thinking, oh, that's an interesting name. Yes, that is an ancestor of the poet Byron. So there you go. A sudden thaw, actually, I said the weather had been rubbish, but there'd been a thaw in the temperature, and the River Weaver, which runs past Nantwich, is flooded. And the royalist army was effectively divided between those who were really close to the town, besieging it, and those who were slightly further back. And the flooded river meant they couldn't actually support each other. And it was at this moment that Fairfax arrives with his parliamentary army of 5,000 from Manchester. In the ensuing battle across the fields to, let me just get myself right, sort of to the west, the northwest of Nantwich, for those of you who know it, The parliamentary forces drove the royalist army that was on the wrong side of the river, as it were, back towards the little village church at Acton, where they surrendered. In fact, they were then actually all put inside the church as a sort of safekeeping place, a POW camp for the royalist forces. And interestingly, at Nantwich Church, you can still see musket ball holes on the walls of the church, although there's talk that it was nothing to do with the battle, and actually parliamentarians were just using the church effectively for target practice after the battle. Not executions, I hasten to add, just literally, firing their guns to see who could shoot from the furthest distance towards the church and things like that. By the way, for my Australians, in the churchyard is the grave at Acton of the first English captain who lost the Ashes, the England-Australia cricket match, that when the English were defeated, the Australians famously took the bales and burnt them and cremated them and said, "Here are the ashes of English cricket." And the unfortunate Englishman who captained England that day is buried in Acton churchyard. So there we go. You can find his grave. There's a wicket, a marble tomb with a cricket wicket on it. Anyway, the Royalists obviously suffered a major defeat here at Nantwich, something like 200 men killed and 1,500 captured, which, when you consider their whole force besieging Nantwich was only 3,500, was a real beating. One of the 1,500 captured actually was a man called, on the Royalist side, was a man called Colonel George Monk. 800 of those 1,500 prisoners actually changed sides, went over to the parliamentarian side, but not Monk. He did go over to the parliamentarians, of course, in 1646, 2 years later, after Charles I had surrendered, and became a highly successful parliamentary commander, not least in Ireland, and then later on commanded the parliamentary forces in Scotland. And it was General Monk who, in 1660, brought his new model army from Scotland back down to London, and fundamentally was the military might that forced Parliament into the restoration of Charles I's son, Charles II. So General Monk, really interesting man. And as I say, captured at the Battle of Nantwich. Battle of Nantwich fundamentally knackered Royalist hopes of securing the northwest of England for the Royalist cause. And every year, actually, there's a celebration in Nantwich, a big reenactment there called Holy Holiday, parliamentarians celebrated with sprigs of holly in their caps after this victory at Nantwich. Obviously, holly's an evergreen plant. It was still growing in January 1644. So there we go. And yeah, I really recommend going to see the battle if ever you have the opportunity and fancy a weekend in Cheshire or weekend in Nantwich itself. Pop along. Last Saturday of January, closest Saturday to the 25th, is always the big commemoration. I used to live in Nantwich and also just nearby, hence why I can have all those little tidbits about who's buried in the graveyard at Acton Church and things like that. So let me get back into the chat, because I'm sure there's all sorts of things going on there. We've got a whole lot of stuff going on about the Elephant and Castle. Oh, someone's there. Cara the Tolkien nerd, says, you think that the Eleanor of Castile was the same Eleanor of the Eleanor Crosses, which you could very well be right, in which case she was the wife of Edward I, not Edward III, so a little bit further back. Edward I, of course, the man who defeated William Wallace up in Scotland, amongst other things. A bit of a warrior king in medieval England. We've got a fair bit there going on about that. I don't want to be rude, but we could be we could be here all day. James Beeching, you cheeky devil! You said about the English cricket captain, he was buried, not cremated. That was just the bales, mate. Just the bales from his cricket that were cremated. But very good, well done. Timothy Hopper, you're happy if you want to talk for cricket for an hour? It'd be really good actually to do some sporting stories, but I think for a lot of my viewers on YouTube at the moment that would be a step too far. Maybe some of these deviations from battles, like cricket stories, like the odd royal story as well, some more biographies, maybe is something I should do in the members channel. Maybe as a live, because then I don't have to spend a lot of time doing all the editing and everything else. But if you're interested in that, folks, yeah, well, tell me. You don't have to be a member to tell me. If you say, yeah, actually, Chris, if you did that sort of thing, I might actually become a member. Then, yeah, just say something in the chat quickly for me. It's always good to have a bit of a poll here. There's a fair few of you on the show at the moment, so thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. QA Library question. Chris, why did the UK, or was it Nelson, declare war on Denmark? Well, funny enough, I might be in a better position to tell you next weekend, actually, or next Friday, because but later today I am flying off to Copenhagen for the weekend. Funny enough, Sarah and I are going, and I am going to seek out a couple of the museums there in Copenhagen, which do talk about, amongst many other things, about the battles, two battles of Copenhagen. Nelson's famous one, and then a one further on in about 1807, 1808, a second battle of Copenhagen. I'll be able to tell you that as well next Friday as well. The very simple answer, QA Library, just to give it like a one-liner, is the Danes, that basically there was a Baltic gathering of states. So the British were basically trying to impose a blockade on France, Napoleonic France, and some of the Baltic countries, including Denmark and also Russia, have basically formed almost like an alliance, not wanting to have a battle with Britain at the time, but they would defend their ships and basically force free trade with whoever they wanted. But the problem was they were far more aligned to France than they were to Britain, so it wasn't in Britain's interests. And fundamentally, the closeness of that alliance worried people in Britain, political masters in Britain. They believed that Denmark, Russia, and others could join Napoleon. And so it was a preemptive, Nelson's Battle of Copenhagen was a preemptive strike. So, yeah, a little bit of a Pearl Harbor moment in British naval history, if I'm honest. The Brits being the Japanese in that case, not the innocent party. But I'll give you a lot more on that. I have done a video about it in the past, but without all my information here, I couldn't give you the exact timeline. Okay. Okay, James Beating, interestingly, Taunton, in fact, they have a Somerset Day when the siege of Taunton by royalist forces was finally lifted. Hey, so a little bit like Nantwich. There you go. Vince, you've just sort of answered where I was coming from. Yeah, and QA Library, you mentioned Iceland and Greenland in World War II. Yeah, and don't forget the Faroe Islands. The British occupied the Faroe Islands in World War II, so they couldn't be used by the Germans. Of course, the Faroe Islands, a bit like Greenland, they are still sort of technically, I think Faroe Islands are still technically something to do with the Danish crown, but have a lot of autonomy, a lot more autonomy than maybe British overseas territories do. Let's have a quick look here. Nelson's was 1801. Thank you very much indeed. So not actually Napoleonic at that stage, more revolutionary France. Righty-ho, let me crack on for you. It's 1:24. So for my Scottish viewers today, 25th of January, 1759, birth of Robbie Burns. There we go. And for my Aussies, I wish some of you happy Australia Day for earlier in the week. 26th of January, 1788, the First Fleet arrives and establishes a penal colony at Botany Bay. First European settlement on Australia and the beginning of a British presence in Australia at the time. Oh, someone talked about sport and cricket in a while. Well, I'll give you another sporting one. 26th of January, 1871, the Rugby Football Union is established in England, actually. The Rugby Football Union is established. So the first time that we had a codified body for rugby, or rugby union, shall I say, in the world. 26th of January, same date, different year, 1885, General Charles Gordon is killed at Khartoum in Sudan. Great stories. I mean, it's one of the things I really love is the whole, I mean, I like the Zulu War stuff in the 19th century, really enjoy the whole Sudan stuff as well. Far bigger war than the Zulu War ever was. And lots of echoes for today, not least, of course, because Sudan is going through a really tough time at the moment, which is a shame because the people there are lovely. I've worked in Sudan in the past, and yeah, great country. Just a shame what's going on, but really interesting as well. Of course, the whole Mahdist rising in Sudan, which has echoes of sort of ISIS and all the sort of things that have happened elsewhere in the Middle East and in the Islamic world, and the reaction from the West against those as well. And indeed, the reaction of some locals against the Mahdists. Don't believe that all Sudanese people, either then or now, think the Mahdi was the great freedom fighter that some people portray him as. Another Scottish one, 26th of January 1926. John Logie Baird gave the very first demonstration of television. Can you believe that? 1926. That, the speed of change in the last 100 years has been phenomenal. We're 99 years since the first television pictures. Now we have YouTube, Netflix, we have live TV. I wonder if John Logie Baird ever thought in his wildest dreams any of that was possible. You can even watch TV on your mobile phone, bonkers. 27th January 1859, Queen Victoria's first grandchild, first of 40 grandchildren she had, was born. Somewhat ironically, he would become Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. So that's how that whole cousins fighting each other bit comes in. So he was the grandson of Queen Victoria, the son of Queen Victoria's oldest child, actually, Princess Victoria, Princess Royal, who married the Crown Prince of Prussia. He became the second German emperor, died very shortly afterwards, and the young Wilhelm becomes German Kaiser. Princess Victoria, Princess Royal, her brother, a younger brother, by only just over a year, was King Edward VII of the United Kingdom. And it was his son, King George V, who was on the throne at the beginning throughout the First World War. That's how the cousins are fighting each other in the First World War. There you go. And speaking of Edwards, 28th of January, 1547, King Edward VI succeeds Henry VIII. The young boy, just about to become a teenager, Edward VI succeeds Henry VIII. Short-lived career, pretty much forgotten in many respects in British and English history, especially when he's squeezed between, Henry VIII, larger-than-life character, and you have Elizabeth I, another larger-than-life character, and sort of sandwiched in between, we have Edward VI and his half-sister, Mary Tudor, Mary I of England, who gets a pretty short piece of history. Interestingly, she was the very first queen in her own right in English history. Up until then, there had only been queens who were married to kings. She was the first monarch as a woman in her own right, a woman as a monarch in her own right. Before I go on with my next story, which takes us to a pirate in the Caribbean, let me just quickly have a look at what's going on in the chat. Yeah, Leslie, you've just said the war in Sudan, much bigger, but far less romantic. Yeah, I mean, there were little bits of romance. The Four Feathers is a good story that comes out of it. I've obviously spawned a whole lot of films about the Four Feathers and the like. But interestingly, the book is far more of a romance book, actually, not so necessarily about Sudan. And the films really are almost not like the book at all. A real deviation when you consider that the films were, pre-Hollywood, as it were, back in the 1930s. They were, it's an interesting deviation from the book. Vince, yeah, you're right. The other cousin was Tsar Nicholas of Russia. I don't want to get into a whole family tree thing. Hey, I could get my flip chart out. Cara Hughes likes my flip chart when I get that out and start drawing everywhere, but not for today. The Emu Wars, I have contemplated the Emu Wars in the past. I think it's pushing the British military angle maybe to, right to the edge. But I know several of my Australian viewers have said, go on, Chris, tell that one, because I'm sure you're going to do it justice. Jen Ingle, Kaiser Wilhelm used to visit Cumbria. God, lucky Cumbria, hey? Vince, and then Edward VI named Lady Jane Grey as his successor, which says a lot about what he thought about his older half-sisters. Yeah. And there's a bit more to it than that as well, Vince. But you're absolutely on the right lines, mate. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Timothy, thank you very much for that about the Emu Wars. Hey, Cara. And Duncan Kilburn. Edward VI's reign is a bit of an enigma. Yeah, it is. I mean, probably the biggest thing, don't forget, maybe two things that we forget about the boy king was he was far more Protestant than his father. Henry was fundamentally a Catholic who'd fallen out with the Pope because he basically couldn't get his leg over with Anne Boleyn. Edward was much more of a Protestant, and in many respects, actually far more Protestant than Elizabeth I as well. And in one respect, you could argue that Edward helped cement the Protestant Reformation that had taken place in England under Henry VIII. The other thing, of course, was that the last major battle between England and Scotland as two separate countries with their own armies was fought during his time. The Battle of Pinkie, great name, eh? Battle of Pinkie, just outside or not far from Edinburgh. But that's, as they say, for another talk. No, I haven't done a one about the massacre at Amritsar. No. Common Book of Prayer from Edward's reign is, I believe. Yeah, actually, that's the third thing. Actually, Duncan, thank you very much indeed. And Leslie says you've always got a deep sadness for Lady Jane Grey. Yeah, she was manipulated by powerful men. She was a bright woman in her own right, actually. I don't think you should say she was some soppy girl who was put on the throne of England. But again, she was more Protestant than Henry VIII. Certainly, interesting moment in English history, which ultimately affects the rest of British history as well. Vince, it was the first Protestant monarch, but never ruled in his own right because there was always a regency council. Yeah, because he wasn't 15 when he died. 15 was the magical age for becoming a ruler in your own right. Righty-ho, folks, let me move on then to another event in British history this week. 28th of January, 1671, Henry Morgan attacks Panama. Henry Morgan, he of Morgan's Rum, okay? Those of you who've seen him, yeah? Welsh buccaneer. Henry Morgan he actually led a force of over 1,200 pirates, basically, privateers, across the Isthmus of Panama to Panama City. He had a loosely interpreted commission from the governor of Jamaica. Jamaica had only been taken by England from Spain about 15, 16 years beforehand. Okay, so the English were now sort of flexing their muscles in the Caribbean. Up until the capture of Jamaica, it had been a bit of a Spanish lake. And of course, the Spanish Empire went right up into modern day sort of Arizona, New Mexico, bits of California, and all the way down to modern day Chile. The only area in the American continent that wasn't, well, in between those, that wasn't under Spanish rule was Brazil, which was part of the Portuguese Empire. Anyway, so here we have Henry Morgan takes 1,200 privateers across the Isthmus of Panama, about a 9-day journey through the jungle, and they then face exhausted, malnourished after that 9 days. They now face a force of about 1,600 Spanish defenders of the city, mainly drawn to the local militia and anyone else who was willing to put up a fight to stop pirates capturing their town. And they actually tried, interestingly, to stampede cattle towards the pirates. You know that moment in Zulu where the cattle stampede out and the Zulu break up the Zulu attack. Well, this was a real attempt by the Spanish civilians to send the cattle out against the buccaneers. Didn't really work, and in the ensuing battle, the privateers might have been hungry and having just walked through the jungle for 9 days. But they knew how to fight, and they were far better trained than most of the local militia in Panama, who'd never, whilst they might have been in the militia, had no military fighting battle experience at all. Something like 400 to 600 Spaniards were killed in the ensuing battle. Morgan lost maybe 12 men, maybe 15. That was it. It was a pretty one-sided battle. And now the buccaneers proceeded to take over Panama and plundered it. Morgan, supposedly himself, actually left Panama with, well, hundreds of thousands of pieces of eight, worth millions in today's money. Spanish, not surprisingly, absolutely furious. And the main reason they were furious was because in 1670, remember this is January 1671, in 1670, in the middle of the year, they'd actually signed a peace treaty with England. But the peace treaty hadn't actually got all the way to Jamaica, let alone to Morgan on his expedition to Panama. So Morgan, and indeed the governor of Jamaica, hauled back to England to face trial for basically organising a pirate raid on a country that England weren't at war with. Basically pleaded absolute ignorance, said, didn't realise there was a treaty, hadn't got to me, sir, and they were let off. Spanish weren't very impressed with that either, but they were let off. In fact, actually, you could tell where this was all going, that in 1674, 3 years later, King Charles II actually unites Henry Morgan, becomes Sir Henry Morgan, and he becomes Lieutenant Governor, or second in command, in Jamaica, where he actually was responsible for trying to stamp out piracy. Oh, what you do when you get a few honours and some power. And he dies on his plantation in Jamaica. He was given a full military honours funeral. Interestingly, in the 1690s, there was a huge earthquake in Jamaica. In fact, Port Royal, the main sort of buccaneer port, the main port of Jamaica, actually sinks into the sea. Also sinking into the sea was a bit of the graveyard containing Henry Morgan's grave. So Henry Morgan's grave is somewhere at the bottom of the sea. Davy Jones' locker, as they would say. Appropriate for a pirate, don't you think? But there we go. A little bit of history that most people don't know about. And so next time you see in the supermarket something, you see Morgan's rum, remember that story. Henry Morgan, Welsh privateer, becomes Sir Henry Morgan, Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, and had led a highly successful attack on the Spanish Empire in Panama, 28th of January, 1671. Whole lot of stuff going on about the Tudors. Really interesting, actually. Maybe we should do something about the Tudors. But again, I'm not sure if doing long-form video here on YouTube would work. I've got to be very careful. The algorithm gets confused if you deviate from your normal stuff. In a very crude way, okay, the algorithm, you guys will be considered some of my central viewers, okay? So when I release a video, you guys will see that coming up. If you're subscribers and you have the little bell icon, it will probably ping and tell you. Otherwise, it will come on your homepage, like History Chap's got a new video. And YouTube, basically, the algorithm watches to see if you guys watch it. And if you do, and you watch it all the way to the end, it will say, okay, these guys like it. So we'll send it to people who sometimes watch the History Chap. And if enough of them watch it, okay, it's like a circle going out. If you throw a stone in the water, okay, ripples. We're going to show it to people who like military history. And if they like it, well, maybe we'll show it to people who like British history. But maybe, workhouses and Bridgerton and things like that, okay? And eventually they'll get to people who like cooking curries and watch American football, in which case, actually, that ripple starts to run out of effect. So if I put it in the center, if I created a video all about, Edward VI and Mary Tudor and Lady Jane Grey, interesting. There'll be a lot of people in that central bit where the stone lands in the water, okay, who will just be like, not interested. And the algorithm basically looks at it and says, well, if that central group aren't interested, why on earth are we going to send it out to some people who sometimes watch the History Chap, let alone to people who like military history or British history? See how it works? So sometimes some of your really good ideas I love, but I've got to find a different way of bringing that to YouTube. Could be, as I say, through members channel, and we just have members specials where, that whole algorithm thing doesn't work because I'm only making it for people who pay. Or I set up a totally different channel, which looks at maybe British history, non-military, or certainly before Britain, the union between England and Scotland in 1707 was established. Don't know. a difficult one. Separate channel probably is the cleaner of everything, but it's equally it doubles my workload, doesn't it? And by the way, HMS Petrel in Shanghai, I was editing that till 3:30 in the morning this week. So yeah, I put the hours in as it is. Hey, Michael Blaine, nice to see you. First time catching a live stream in a while. I'm here. Nothing changes. Waffling away. It's 1:40. We only got halfway through the week so far. Got a few more stories to tell you. Richard Sweeney, I'm all for your longer form videos. Yeah, interesting. I've started pushing them out towards a half-hour mark. Okay, I've toyed around with 14, 15 minutes. Toyed around with 19 minutes. But actually, the sweet spot seems to be around that 27 to 30 minutes. Always an outlier. And of course, the outlier is, and knacks all my stats up, is my most popular video of all time. Over 2 million views now. What happened to Colour Sergeant Bourne after the Battle of Rorke's Drift? Is 14 minutes long. So in one respect, rather than saying I should make all my videos 14 minutes, I'm looking at it and thinking that for whatever reason, that's the real outlier. Because strangely enough, my second most popular video of all time, Battle of Omdurman in Sudan, 29 minutes, well over 1 million views. As I say, 29 minutes. My third, what happened to Hicks Pasha in Sudan prior to Gordon of Khartoum. I think that's 27.5 minutes. That's had over 1 million views as well. So thank you very much for that endorsement about the long form videos. Kevin Kennelly says, I need to team up with other history content providers. Yeah, had a very interesting conversation with Chris Parkinson last week, Redcoat Military History, about, yeah, we'd like to collaborate more, or like to collaborate. We have lots of chit chats between the two of us, but actually doing something together might be fun. Thank you very much for that one. Oh, Kevin Kennelly, team up with the Drac. Team up with Drac. Yeah, Draken Final, whatever it's called. Yeah, I know what you mean. Which one? And do a video on the naval history of the East India Company. Oh, that would be a cool one. Thank you very much, Kevin, for that idea. Like that one. And James Beeching, are you going to do the Battle of Oudenarde? Yes, next week. Actually, it's coming out for you next week, James. All right. One of Marlborough's least known battles. And actually, the battle that wasn't a set piece battle is only one that wasn't a set piece battle. It's actually, in many respects, like a modern battle, in the sense that it's moving parts. Literally, he was throwing men into, his force were still coming up to battle, and he was bringing them on board as they arrived, rather than all lining up in classic sort of Blenheim style battle, and Waterloo for that matter. This was one where it was drip feeding, and what started off in theory should have been a French victory. The French early part could have been a French victory. They managed to give it away by faffing about, and by the time, and then Marlborough brought the forces on board, and the French couldn't win. In fact, actually, the French lost. Interesting battle, because the Old Pretender was at that battle as well, although didn't play a fighting part. Interestingly, Old Pretender there from the Jacobite cause, and leading in the cavalry for the Hanoverians was their young Prince George, who would later become George II of Great Britain, whose forces, led by his son, would face the Old Pretender's son, Charles Edward Stuart, at the Battle of Culloden. Interestingly, at the Battle of Oudenarde, bit of a spoiler alert, but Prince George actually has his horse shot from beneath him. Oh, how history could have been different. Okay. Quick one there. All of you haven't seen it. Albert Ball, do catch it. Leslie, yeah, thank you very much for that endorsement about my video about Albert Ball, First World War young teenage fighter race, gets the Victoria Cross. And yeah, I forgot, Leslie, that your brother went to Trent College in, technically Trent College is Derbyshire, isn't it? It's in Long Eaton, but yeah, near Nottingham, which is the college that Albert Ball was at. Okay. Vince Lander, history is a matter of inches. Oh, so many times. So many times. What's that old poem about? For the want of a nail, the horseshoe was lost. For the want of a horseshoe, the horse was lost. For the want of the horse, a messenger was lost. And for the want of the messenger, the battle was lost. Yeah, it's all sort of small things. And you just think, if you pull one thing out, history would be so different, wouldn't it? It's the famous one, isn't it? Winston Churchill looked the wrong way when he was in New York in the 1930s, got hit by a taxi, was in intensive care. Being Winston Churchill, he survived. But, amazing that. He was already, in many respects, he was a has-been politician in Britain. He had his moment. He was this, self-seeking publicist who opposed Indian independence, thought that Edward VIII should have been king, should have married Wallis Simpson, and was banging on about the man with the funny moustache in Germany being a warmonger. And that's how history probably would have remembered him. They would have remembered him most certainly as the man probably as Gallipoli. That's if anyone remembered. Australians and New Zealanders would probably remember that. Most Brits wouldn't even remember who Winston Churchill was. Isn't that amazing? Right. Geraint, hello to you too. Nice that you're with us. Neil Smith says, and someone says, oh, sorry, Neil Smith says, what about the wild geese at Culloden? Yeah, interesting one. Going to do Culloden at some stage. Culloden, Prestonpans, Sedgemoor, that period of British history, I think really interesting, and to actually maybe visit some of the battlefield sites. How about doing a live from a battlefield site? Wouldn't that be cool? Obviously in Britain, there's always a downside, which would be the weather, because whenever I would go, I bet it'd be absolutely belting down. I'd be filming from inside my car or something, wouldn't I? From the car park with a cup of tea from the local visitors centre. Leslie, oh, Wallis Simpson, the Meghan Markle of her time. Ouch, ouch. the fact I haven't said outrageous, Leslie, says it all, really, doesn't it? Geraint says, have I tried Guns Across the River on the Alamo of the North? No, I haven't yet, but thank you. You did. I have got it in my reading list, okay, but haven't done anything about it. Let me keep rolling. We've got about 10 minutes, so let me find something else to do. To tell you what, the 28th of January, 1770, Lord North becomes Prime Minister. Lord North actually is Britain's fourth longest serving Prime Minister. You've probably never even heard of him. Some of my Americans might know Lord North because, of course, he was Prime Minister for 12 years, from 1770 to 1782. And in that period, my Americans will know him as the British Prime Minister who was in charge when the British surrendered at Yorktown. In fact, he was Prime Minister the whole way through the American Revolutionary Wars, War of Independence. And actually could hold it together during the War of Independence. But in 1781, British defeated at Yorktown. Effectively, the American colonies were lost militarily at that stage. And by now, the pressure mounts on Lord North, and he resigns in 1782. Interesting that during his tenure, many people forget that he was also the Prime Minister during the Gordon riots in London in 1780. Interesting moment in English history, British history, where anti-Catholic riots in London. And also in 1773, he was the Prime Minister that pushed through the India Regulatory Act, which basically, for the first time, started to clip the wings of the East India Company. And whoever was reading William Dalrymple's book, certainly Anarchy, talks about this. The East India Company and the British government had an interesting relationship. Let's just put it that way. That the East India Company, almost within, where were we? Within 15 years of the Battle of Plassey and taking over Bengal, the British government started to realise that they had this potentially a trading company that was now actually ruling more subjects than they did in Britain, and the North American colonies, what it was in 1773. So anyway, he pushed that one through. So there we go. Where are we at? 28th of January, 1846, the Battle of Aliwal in the First Anglo-Sikh War. This was the principally a cavalry charge led by Sir Harry Smith. It ends in a British victory. It's the only moment in the Anglo-Sikh War, or the First Anglo-Sikh War, where Field Marshal Lord Gough is not there and not leading a full frontal bayonet charge against the Sikh cannons. And this is a victory for Sir Harry Smith. Harry Smith, who eventually ends up in South Africa, where the town of Ladysmith is named after his wife, and there's actually a town of Harry Smith named after him as well. So there we are. And speaking of South Africa, 28th of January 1881, the Battle of Laing's Nek, the opening battle of the First Boer War. Major General Sir George Coley, one of the Ashanti ring of officers, Oswald Mosley, I was going to say, Garnet Wolseley's Ashanti ring of officers. He has got 1,200 men, tries to storm the heights where 2,000 Boers are on the border between British Natal and Transvaal, and tries to storm the heights where there are about 2,000 Boers hold up under the command of Commandant General Piet Joubert. Joubert holds, the high ground. The British assault, mainly led by the 58th Regiment of Foot, also a cavalry charge as well. And the British lose 84 killed and something like 113 wounded. So nearly a fifth of their whole force under Coley is either killed or captured. Killed or wounded, 2 captured, I think it was, at Laing's Nek. The 58th lost most of those casualties. Something like 175 of the 200 casualties were from the 58th Regiment, including their commanding officer, Colonel Dean. Boers, on the other hand, lost something like 14 dead and 27 wounded. So decisive Boer victory. It was the last occasion that a British regiment carried its colours into battle. And in fact, the 58th lost 4 officers who were running forward at different stages to lift up the colour and keep trying to advance with it. In their red tunics, holding a big flag. I mean, what bigger target or better target can you possibly have for a Boer sharpshooter than that? So there we go. Bit of the first battle of first Anglo-Boer War in South Africa. Haven't done one about Laing's Nek. Have done one about the British defeat at Majuba. 29th of January 1856, the Victoria Cross is instituted. Talked all about that on Monday night with my patrons live call. If ever you're interested in finding out a bit more about becoming a patron, by the way, down below in the descriptions you can find the bit about become a patron, and you'll find out more. But basically, I do a live show just for patrons every Monday evening where I go into about 3 topics from British history this week in real depth. One of which, as I say, this week was the VC being instituted. Another one that we had this week was actually on the 31st of January 1919. Red Clydeside, the big demonstrations which many feared were going to be a beginning of a Bolshevik revolution in Britain, up in Glasgow, and we talked all about that. Interestingly, I started the week by saying, Henry VIII gets in on the act with Anne Boleyn, and that it wouldn't be a week in British history if the Tudors weren't in there somewhere. And I also made a throwaway comment that it wouldn't be a week, without Winston Churchill making some sort of appearance as well. Well, blow me down. 30th of January 1965, the state funeral of Winston Churchill. There we go. First non-royal state funeral since William Gladstone in 1898. Churchill's funeral takes place in St Paul's Cathedral. There'd been a solemn procession up the River Thames, if you remember, some of you might recall, and then he is actually taken by train and he's buried in Blaydon, the village just at the foot of Blenheim Castle, the family home, Duke of Marlborough, obviously one of his ancestors. Speaking of great parliamentarians, maybe someone who wasn't such a great parliamentarian, or so you think, 31st of January 1606, Guy Fawkes was executed. Guy Fawkes, obviously famously in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament. And the last one I'll give you for this week is the 31st of January 1941. British Commonwealth troops defeat the Italians at Agudat in Eritrea in the East African campaign in the Second World War. Again, one of those things most people, if you ask most Brits will know that obviously we fought at D-Day and Dunkirk and everything, and some will know that there was an Italian campaign, and others will remember that we did fight in Burma. But particularly with General Slim, of course, with Kohima and Imphal and Admin Box at Arakan. But what is interesting was that there was also a war in East Africa. British and British Commonwealth troops, Indians, some African troops, fighting the Italians. The Italians actually had an empire in East Africa at this time. They had most of what's now Somalia, called Italian Somaliland. They had Eritrea, and they had in the 1930s finally conquered Abyssinia, modern day Ethiopia. Well, British, Indian, and Commonwealth troops were under Lieutenant General William Platt, and they'd attacked the Italians at Argodot on the 28th of January. They'd been repulsed, actually, and it took another 3 days of hard fighting to finally break through. They broke through using Matilda tanks, which went into battle against Italian Fiat tanks, slightly more outdated than the Matildas. And the Matildas won. They broke through, and then the infantry were able to take advantage of that breakthrough. The Italians retreated in complete disorder. About 1,000 prisoners were immediately taken. 14 tanks, 28 guns were captured at Argodot, and the Italians fell back towards Kerin, the next stronghold. And en route, they lost about 16,000 men, most of whom surrendered. This is where that beginning of that whole, the Italians only surrender sort of, urban myth comes from. I say urban myth. A lot of Italians surrendered, but you could argue a lot of Brits surrendered in the Second World War as well, not least at Singapore. But we were never known as the country that sort of the Italians had this image, mainly from the Second World War, of always having a white flag somewhere nearby. Unfair on a lot of the Italians, if I'm really honest, and unfair on the Italians who fought in the First World War as well. But they certainly didn't have quite that bloody-minded attitude that many British soldiers had, as exemplified, and British sailors who had with HMS Petrel. Last night's video all about Shanghai 1941. Anyway, the Italians retreat in disorder to Kerin, and by the 27th of March, the British, less than 2 months later, Kerin falls as well. Within just over a week, early April, the capital of Eritrea is captured, Asmara, and the main naval port at Massawa. 2 days, in fact, actually, after Massawa fell, they took them 2 days earlier. The capital of the Italian Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, had also fallen. And really, this was the end of the Italian campaign, or the battle of the 31st of January 1941 at Argodot was the beginning of the end for the Italians in East Africa. The very final Italian troops surrendered in November 1941, hold out at small enclave final redoubt in Abyssinia. But by then it was just a matter of time. They weren't going to do anything else. So and again, interesting. Might come back to the East Africa campaign of the Second World War later this year. I've got some spaces booked out for little known campaigns in the Second World War, including the British occupation of Madagascar as well. Thought that'd be an interesting one to do. Again, another little story that most people don't know about. I've also got up there. I've got Ord Wingate in Abyssinia with the Gideon brigade, the Jewish brigade, and then also Ord Wingate and the Chindits. So those coming up for you later this year. Let's just whiz over, see where the chat's gone. Reticent Simmer, just in your comment, how far off is Errol Flynn's Charge of the Light Brigade movie from the real thing? Well, let's just say it's Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn's about as historically accurate as well. Yes, as another Australian actor. It's pretty far removed, I think is the answer. Good film, though. Good film, Errol Flynn's Charge of the Light Brigade. Oh, we've got all sorts of things going on here. Leslie, you're sitting in Bannister, Tarleton County. Yeah, very active in that part of the world, wasn't he? Yeah. We've got loads going on here. Sorry, I'm just desperately trying to get back into it. I was chit-chatting away. Matilda tank was a better tank than the early war Panzers, says Vince Lander. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Let me just go down to the bottom. Richard Sweeney says Churchill's funeral train was hauled by a Battle of Britain class locomotive named the Winston Churchill. Thank you very much for that. Appropriate. Let's face it, the Brits do ceremonial stuff like that. Yeah, second to none, isn't it? you'd be interested in that, says Lionheart. Thank you very much indeed. And James Beeching says, Chris, have I done a video about the on Britain and Somaliland in 1940? No, I've only done one, and that was the Caulfield's last stand in 1913 when he was fighting in British Somaliland. So I haven't done a Somaliland. I can roll that into some sort of talk about East Africa, because the Somaliland campaign is reasonably quick and over quite quickly. Yeah. Cara, was Errol Flynn? Yes, it could be a bit of a Braveheart moment. Yes, you're absolutely right, Cara. Thank you. Leslie, in South Carolina, Bannister Tarleton is known as Bloody Tarleton. Yeah, interesting though, isn't it? In many respects, okay, and I'm not a massive expert on Tarleton at all. He's a little bit like Mad Mitch in Aden in the 60s. It's like, if you want to run a counter-insurgency operation, let's face it, that's actually what the British were facing. They were facing an insurgency, weren't they, in the American colonies at the time, a very successful insurgency, which was starting to galvanize around actual armies. But Tarleton took the fight to the rebels, as he would have seen them. So an interesting man. And Leslie, it's one of those classics, isn't it? Yeah, today's hero or today's villain is tomorrow's hero, or my friend is your enemy, your enemy is my friend. It's all that sort of stuff, isn't it? Yeah, had Tarleton used a similar tactic, say fighting Nazi Germany, would he be a hero, or would you say he was a villain? Bloody Tarleton. Interesting. Get the feeling that had he been let loose on some colonial campaigns, it could have been a bloodbath. Tarleton in the Boer War. That would have been an interesting one, wouldn't it? Right, everyone, we are sort of at the top of the hour, and I need to crack on. With some stuff. I'm doing some stuff, hopefully, about the Opium War. I need to do some stuff on that. Also, got to get myself ready and packed so that I don't get into trouble by holding up the charabanc when we're off to Birmingham Airport to go to Copenhagen later. And thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thanks to all of you for today, and thanks for all your support. All of you who are members, all of you who are patrons, all of you who just watch my videos, make comments, give me thumbs up. I really appreciate it. So hopefully that's given you a little insight into a bit of British history, events that happened in British history this week. And I wish you a fantastic weekend. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, we'll be having the Battle of Oudenarde coming for you from Marlborough. Marlborough's third great victory in the field against, yet again, the French. Hooray! So there you go, folks. See you all very soon. Thanks for your support. Have a great weekend.